This is Matt Owen with Granbury's Volunteer Fire Department. This will be our second video on our new radios coming in. Today's video is going to be more focused on the actual usage of the new Harris radios right here. I'll go through just some really basic operations with it, and hopefully this will help you be familiarized with it. So the very first thing we're going to start with is literally the mic. So we have a push to talk, a clip, this little clicker right here. This is to help increase the volume on the radio in case you forgot to turn it down. The other nice thing about it is if you do have it turned up all the way and you turn this up higher, it'll actually even go louder. I can tell you from everyone in our department touching and handling the radios that the man down, the emergency, the SOS button is live. So you've got one on the top of the radio and on top of the mic. Pointed at the mic first, radio. In the event that you activate that, it does go to dispatch, and they'll be the ones that'll be making radio calls and checking with it. So just letting everyone know that it is live now, and it is going to announce to however you have the radios physically labeled, whether you have them by the truck or just by unit number. So just make note of that. Going on into the actual radio itself, I want to talk about just the top. This very first button, this is just to help turn the radio on, and it is also the volume switch. So when the radio physically turns on, you'll see the screen pop up. Okay? We'll talk about this button later. We'll come back to it. This is your channel selector on the top, and then on the bottom is your zone selector. So as I come across, I can select different zones, and I'll tell you that those aren't the only zones that are available to you. But we'll start with the very, very basics. The other thing I'm going to do is just turn the volume back down because I'm going to get blown up by dispatch guaranteed. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by just simply going over to Zone A. Okay, Zone A, and when the new radio system goes live, you need to take a look at your screen and make sure that it looks like this. And it says Hood County FD Operations. Okay, I'll actually talk about how to change the program here later, and you may end up having to fast forward your videos to get to that point, then come back to this timestamp. But once you have a zone selected, you can go through your different channels. So I'm going to just go through it kind of slow. You'll see that Hood County Dispatch and Texas EMS channel are on everything, and that's kind of by design. It makes it easy that in the event that you need to talk to dispatch and or EMS, that it's just one click away. But Zone A is going to be our primary zones that we'll be working off of here when we're in Hood County. So as I go through it, you saw dispatch, you saw EMS, now you see TAC 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we get to ground 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we're back to, I can't read it backwards, I'm going to have to turn it, air to ground, in the event that you need to talk to a helicopter, and finally your landing zone, if you need to set up a specific landing zone, and then you're back to EMS dispatch and fire dispatch. Okay, the one thing I want to make note of is that anytime that you're on channel 16, it's kind of hard to see right there, or channel 1, you're going to be on dispatch. And that makes it so that you don't have to physically look at the radio so that you can quickly get back to dispatch. While I have the radio tilted this way, the other thing I want to show you is the physically color of the top of the radio. So as I start to go through it, you'll notice that the colors change. Hopefully. Maybe not. It's new to me. So evidently everything in Zone A is going to be red. Okay. We'll check out the other zones as we get to it. I saw one that may be changed. But you can also read the top of the radio without having to pull it out of your pocket so that you can see what channel you're actually on. So I'm going to switch over back to Zone A, or correction, Channel 1 on Zone A. So this is going to be our most common operating channel that we're going to use here. Here's the basic concept. We get dispatched any part in the county, okay? We will be dispatched literally on fire dispatch. In that dispatch, they're going to tell you a TAC channel to respond on. So for example, it's Granbury, they're going to say respond on TAC 5. So we're going to switch over to TAC 5. Okay, and we're going to go and route on TAC 5, we're going to check on scene on TAC 5, and we're going to do everything on TAC 5. Here's the kicker. Let's say it's a bigger operating call. It's a larger structure fire. You just need to set up different sector commanders. This is where the ground ops come in. So ideally, you'll be on scene, typically operating off of TAC 1 through 5, whatever's assigned to you by dispatch, and in the event that you need to set up more specific ground operation channels, you can set those up as well. But dispatch will be monitoring that TAC channel. Now, let's go down the rabbit hole and let's just pretend that you have multiple calls toned out for any agency. There's a chance that dispatch could actually keep everyone on that TAC channel, or let's say it's 2 structure fires or 2 separate car accidents. They may assign one unit to go and one group of vehicles responding to an accident on one specific TAC channel, and you might be in the same jurisdiction, but they may tell you to go to respond on a different TAC channel. This is where reading the call notes and just paying attention to the actual dispatch information is going to be critical. I assure you, dispatch will very promptly correct you if you've screwed up. Plan on that. So, that's a very basic operation for Zone A, okay? If we go look at Zone B, and I'm going to slide all the way back over to Channel A, or Channel 1, Zone B has a kind of some extra stuff for us, and then has some auxiliary fireground operations for us, and then more of like some system-wide stuff. So we'll just go through it. Hood County Dispatch, EMS Dispatch, we have emergency management, so in the event that we have a large call, tornado, train derailment, whatever, okay, and you need to be talking to the EOC, there it is. Then you finally have the fire marshal, and then you have ground 6, 7, 8, 9, and then Erath Fire Department, Erath Fire 2, and then Parker County, Somerville, and Lake Granbury Medical Center, weather, EMS dispatch, and then you're finally rounded back off with fire dispatch. So it's one thing to make note of that there's a lot of different channels that are available to you in different situations. So I kind of like think of our Zone B as more of a mutual aid channel and or kind of a disaster channel, or really more of an incident command channel. You can see on a larger scene where whoever's got ICS is going to be sitting on possibly Zone B quite a bit. So I'm going to slide over to Zone C. I'm going to come back to Channel 1. It's a no shock. Again, dispatch, EMS dispatch, Lake Granbury Medical, and then we're in our V fires. Now we're finally in our interoperability. Okay, coming across V fire 21 through 26, and then we're 26, and then we're in our V med. Coming across Texas Air, and then we're in our Texas call. Hood fire. This is 700. Hood fire 2. EMS dispatch, and then you're back on the P25 trunking. Okay, if I slide over to Zone D, go back to Channel 1, this is actually all of our 700. Okay, so we have fire dispatch, we have EMS dispatch, and then we're back in our old 700 system. 700 main, south, north, and then the specific 700 zones for each department. As we slide across, back to EMS dispatch and fire dispatch. So that's our 7 main zones. But one thing that we'll highlight as we go further into the radio, but the vast majority of the work that we'd be doing in Hood County or in our neighboring departments, realistically, is through these 16 channels and these 4 zones. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to slide over to Zone A again, and I'm going to go to Channel 1. And then the next thing I want to start to highlight here is very specifically this middle button. Okay, what this does is this pulls up our menu. So the very first one, it says call. So we slide over, it says scan. Come across to security, messages, utility, and finally zones. So I'm going to start on the last one. So all these separate zones in here, these all potentially have up to 16 channels stored in them. And I'm going to leave it up to you guys to spend time to actually go through the radio and kind of figure out what's in all these zones. But I can tell you our main zone that you always need to round about and come back to is Hood County VFD operations. That's where it's going to bring you back to all the zone A, B, C, D, and the 16 channels that you're familiar with. Now, what I am going to do is I'm going to go down to this zone 4. Actually, I'm going to do one better than that. I'm going to do one of the Granbury PD channels. Okay, so you see it says GPD event 1. So if I start going up here to the channels, event 2, and then we have event 1A, 2, and then we just emergency management, fire marshal, dispatch. Okay, and you're not going to find, if we go over to Zone B, go back to Channel 1. Okay, now we're in the tactical channels. Okay, it's going to be time for you to go through these channels and actually figure out what's all in here. What I can tell you, and it's going to be really, really common, is that as these radios are released and everyone's trying to familiarize themselves, what's going to happen is they're going to get on a different zone. And that's going to be a problem, and they're going to get frustrated, and they're going to turn around and put the radio back up in the truck or hanging on the wall, and the radio's not going to be set up to go. I can promise you that this is one of the biggest things that you need to actually make sure that your membership is very familiar with operating, is how to switch zones and how to actually get to the appropriate operations channel. And again, I'm going to highlight it again. Center button. Slide over to zones, and then go up to number 3, if I can get to the right button. Hood County operations. Okay, and now I'm back where I need to be. But this will be one of our biggest battles just right out of the gate, because a lot of people aren't going to understand how to get on the appropriate zone. Now, one of the other huge learning curves that I just found out in is that our radios, our Harris radios, are currently programmed and set up for incorporating our VHF system and our 700 system. And when this system goes live, you actually need to change to a different program. Don't hate the messenger. This is just the way that this system operates. Okay? So what you do is you go to Program. You go to Menu, you slide over to the little wheelie box where it says Utility, and then you scroll down to Program. Okay, if you notice that my little green arrow is at the Hood County FD 06222223, that is the one you need to be on. In the event that you happen to have the Hood Fire XL 200 selected, and I'm going to go ahead and just do it. I think I need to hit OK. Okay, and if you notice, like all of my screen and everything that you had been able to clearly see has now changed and it's blown out and it's bright. That's because I've literally changed programs. Okay, so I'm going to change the screen brightness first. So the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to hit menu and I'm going to slide over because I can't see it on the screen because it's too bright. I'm going to go over to utility and I'm going to go down to display settings, backlight, and I'm going to turn that to auto. And shockingly, you can see my screen again. Okay, so I'm going to go to settings, go over to utility, and I'm going to go down to program, and then I'm going to go to the 2223. I'm going to hit OK. Yes. Okay. Now I'm back on it. But again, I changed programs, so I got to change my screen brightness. Realistically, the screen brightness isn't something you're going to be changing too often. So I'm going to just change it back for the ease of the video. Here we go. Okay. I'm going to go back to here, and I want to highlight the programming real quick, or the utility menu. For anyone that's watching this, you need to be real careful going in and setting up and customizing the radio to your use. Unless it's very specifically issued to you, but it's a community radio, don't go in there and change everything to your personal settings. No one else will be able to use it. No one else will know how to backtrack out of it. Leave it alone, okay? The most important thing is to be familiar with is to how to change the programming, and that's it. There's nothing else that you really need to adjust here. It's up to the chiefs, it's up to your officers. Leave it at that. Do not customize the radios to your use. So again, one thing I just want to highlight again real quick. I had a little bit of a video error and had to fire back up. I want to highlight how to select zones and change the programming. So again, hit the center button, scroll over to utility, and then go down to program. Hit the center button, and then you can select the appropriate radio programming that you want. To select a different zone, scroll over to zones, and go through the zones that you think is appropriate. Okay. Another thing that I want to highlight here is back in the settings. I want to go over to scan real quick, and you can physically set up your own scan list. So you can set up what's important for you to actually have always scanning in the background. Okay. Once you determine, and I'm going to leave that up for you to figure out. Okay. The one thing that you do need to know is how to actually turn the scanning feature on the radio. So how do I know if scanning's working right now? Well, there's nothing here right now that indicates that the scan is on. Go to the side button, hit the up arrow. You see that icon? That means that the scan is on in the background. Turn it off, it's gone. Talk about some of these other buttons. If you notice, if I hit the down arrow, the Bluetooth came on. Okay. This button is your push to talk. Okay, you saw it highlight there. And then lastly, this black button on the top does nothing. Okay, since we're going through all this, I'm going to talk about some of this real quick. So that's the current radio antenna strength. In other words, what's your connection to the antenna? It's good. Okay, this little icon here is actually really important. I'm going to try and zoom in just a hair. So that lightning bolt with those two bars, that tells you that you're transmitting at the maximum power. If it's at half, you're transmitting at half the power. There's a couple of radios that we've stumbled into where it was transmitting at half the power. How would you fix that? Go into settings, go over to utility, and then find the appropriate selection. Consider it a challenge. Give you a good orientation for learning how to use the radio a little better. Okay. The very last thing that I want to emphasize on this is the frustrations and difficulties that people will have with this new radio program is strictly because they haven't put the time, energy, and effort into actually working with the radio a little bit. You, your organizations, and arguably your mutual aid organizations need to actually communicate a little bit on how you think your operations and settings are going to be set up, because no one's going to be operating the exact same way. Remember, call comes in, dispatch is strictly for dispatching the call. They will assign you a TAC channel. From that TAC channel, when you get on scene, you'll determine if you need any ground op channels. A small scene? Probably not. Minor scene? Combined with another toned out minor scene, you might actually end up having several calls running on the same TAC channel. It's ultimately going to be determined by whoever's in command on scene, because you can always request a dedicated TAC channel, or you can always request just to move to a ground ops channel. It's not that big of a deal. The mutual aid function of this, we kind of stumbled into this a few weekends ago. The big thing I would ask you is that if you set up on scene, let's say it's a large wildland fire, and all of a sudden you start having a bunch of departments in your area that they don't have your radio, or maybe they don't have your channels yet, go to VFire and set up a VTAC channel. VFire 21, 22, 23, whatever. Pick a channel. Make it 10 times easier for the neighboring departments traveling in to be able to work with you. If you don't have that, give them a radio so that they can actually communicate with you. This is our best attempt to try and get you somewhat familiarized and orientated with the new radio system coming in. Questions, concerns, comments, litigation? Just let me know. Appreciate your time.